Hello, I'm Ace, and today I'm going to be walking through the Lab 4 pen tool practice activities. So this lab is basically going to walk you through the basics of the pen tool, so getting a sense of the controls, kind of how it all works. And then you're going to dive into a little activity of tracing some fruit. So what I'm going to do today is I will be walking through the entirety of this quick sheet and kind of talking through everything. I'm trying to get into the nuances that are kind of hard to communicate through text. And then I'm going to just go ahead and walk through how I would tackle all of these illustrations. They might not necessarily be the way that you would have to do them, but I'm going to be showing you how I would approach doing some of them. And some of them are going to involve using shapes, using lines, in maybe less conventional ways. So let's get started. So starting with the practice worksheet, the very first exercise is just to get comfortable with the pen tool. So like we talked about in class, you can access the pen tool either by clicking here or just by pressing P on your keyboard. So I usually just use P. And then here we want to connect the dots using perfectly straight lines. As long as you don't click and drag, you're always going to be making straight lines. So here I can click, and then if I want to go here, you can see that when I'm aligned, it'll kind of snap me into place with this red line. But if I want to make sure it's there, I can just hold shift. And just like before with movement and resizing, it'll snap me along that axis. So here I can click here, and you'll notice that when I have shift held, it's going to snap me in these 45-degree increments so that I can go in a perfect diagonal if I want as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now that I've finished this vector, I'm going to press escape to get this leading path off my cursor. Let's escape once, and then I can press done or press escape again. So I've pressed escape again here, and then I'm going to go ahead and toggle up my stroke to be a little bit thicker so I can see it better. So I'm going to bring this up to 5. That's still a little bit thin. I'm going to make it 8 just so it's a little bit more visible. And here you see that I've mostly hit the targets, but if I do want to go in and fix them, I can just click on this network, the vector network, and click edit object or press enter. And once I'm in here, I can go ahead and move these around. So when I'm moving them, I might want to still hold shift. And if I want to say move both of these nodes up and the whole line up to the dotted line, I can go ahead and move just the line, which will move both of the nodes attached to it. Or if I want to make sure everything's selected, I can do a drag select like that. Yep. Yeah, and you'll notice that when I did this drag select, it didn't select this diagonal line in the center, even though I'm touching it. So you see here, I've selected basically half of this line, but it's not being selected because it's only going to ever select a path if you have the entire path selected, if that makes sense. So it knows that sometimes you want to do stuff like this and you don't want to touch everything whenever you have a lot of lines going on. So in this case, when I do that, it's not going to select this one. But if I want to select this, the easiest thing to do would just be to click on it once, or I can drag and select all of it. But in this particular case, I have to end up selecting all 3 lines just because of the way the diagonal is angled. Yeah. I can also do the same shift click that you would see normally. I realize that the gray and the blue is a little bit hard to see, but if I want to select, let's say the diagonal line and the horizontal line, I can click once on the horizontal and then press shift and click on the other one. You see that they're both highlighted now, and I can drag them with me. And because I didn't select the top line, this node is not moving, but since this node is shared, it is selected and it's going to move with me. So yeah. Okay. Now we're going to go to exercise 2, so actually making our first Bezier curves. So first what we're going to do is practice using the bend tool. So the bend tool, when you are in the pen tool, you can see this is kind of secondary option. It is accessed whenever you hold control, and it basically means that you're going to be toggling those anchors that are part of the Bezier curves. So with this, I want to start by drawing a straight line from 1 to 2. And then I'm going to actually press escape once to get the path off, and then hold control and drag out from the middle. And you see what that did just now. I'll undo. As soon as I clicked it, it brought out those anchor lines, this line right here and this line right here. And those anchor lines are going to give me that curve. So if I hadn't been holding control and I just clicked on it, it would automatically have this middle node pop up, and I could just drag that out to make a straight line, or not a straight line, sorry, a sharp angle, a sharp edge there. But when I hold control or command, it's going to let me use the bend tool. Yeah. So what I'm actually going to do here is there's two ways to use the bend tool. What I'm doing here is when you use the tool against the whole path, it's going to give you this nice, pretty, like well-made curve. But what I want to actually do is show you what it looks like when you drag from the point. So when you dragged from the center, it pulled out two different anchors, and they're kind of they're proportioned based on where on the line that you click. So if I click closer to here, you see that this line is much longer than this line. And if I do it closer to the middle, the two lines are a lot closer to being even. But when I do the bend tool from the point itself, the node itself, it's only going to drag out a single anchor. It's only going to affect that node. So basically, if you use the bend tool on the path, it affects both nodes on both sides. But if you use the bend tool on just the node, it'll only affect that singular node. So here, if I just drag out to this line, and I drag this one out again to the same line, you're going to see that it's going on that dotted line path that I wanted before. It's going to make this really nice curve right here. Cool. Exercise 3, more curves. So this is just kind of walking you through a couple different methods of making Bezier curves. It's going to take a little bit to get used to, and a lot of these are going to be a lot of personal exploration of clicking and dragging. But the goal here is to get used to adding curves while you're going. So as you draw, adding those curves. So what you're going to do here is click and drag to bring this up here. And then this is already all the way up here. So this first, oh shoot, that went away. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the handle up. And what that's going to do is basically start the curve going this way instead of going this way, or instead of not being a curve at all. It's going to bring one of the anchors up so that it's going to curve the way I want it to. So you see that this line is curved instead of straight like it was before because I've already dragged out one of the anchors. Now when I'm here, I'm going to click and then I'm actually going to drag it down, and you see what's happening is that whenever you have a second curve, there will automatically be a second mirrored anchor. Now this mirrored anchor is going to make sure that the curve is really smooth, because now when I add this third angle, you see that this middle curve feels really smooth. It's got that like nice S shape to it instead of being, instead of being really sharp. So if I had deleted like this anchor, without deleting this one, it would look like this. It would look pretty uncomfortable. Because this middle isn't mirrored. Because it is mirrored, it has that nice, like, the curve is going the same amount in opposite directions, basically. Yeah. And then exercise 4 is going to be a little bit different. So here, we're going to try to make the same shape in a different manner, where I'm going to draw a straight line through all 3 dots first, and then use the bend tool to make the curve afterwards. So I've drawn the straight line with an additional dot in the middle. I'm going to press escape once, and then I'm going to holding control now. You see that my cursor changes from the pen tool to the bend tool. Drag this up, drag this down, and then drag this down. So even though we did that whole format differently, what you're going to see is that the anchors ended up the same way. So this happened because when we add the bend tool anchors later, the mirroring traits are kind of not on all of the time, or they aren't on by default, which is why this one gets dragged out this way instead of upwards. It's a little confusing because you see here that even though we dragged it going up, it went this way. It's just part of the mirroring properties. So you're going to have to get used to that and just see which method generally feels better for you, whether you want to add the curves as you go or if you want to do them afterwards. You're going to get more comfortable with things. as you just kind of practice them more and more. And the reality is that you can always just go in and edit them again. So if you decide that you want them to be less of a curve, just go in and fix it. Just go in and, you know, change the curves to look the way you want them to. Like, maybe this is what I actually wanted, and that's not cheating. That's totally fine. So yeah. Exercise 5, like I just mentioned, you're not always going to get the perfect curves. You're basically never going to get the exact perfect curves all the time. So what we've got going on here is this existing vector that has nodes basically in the right places. I don't need to move them, but the handles are not quite right. So what we're going to do is just drag these out in a way that feels intuitive to match the dotted line. And what you can think of is that all of these handles or all of these anchors need to be tangential. So running across or running through the angles that they're actually going for. So here I can move it this way. You can see that the wider I go, the wider the curve is, and the narrower I go, the narrower it is. So it feels like maybe around here is good. I go here, and I can move it to maybe here. And you see that like this middle segment right here is affected by both handles. So with that, I might want to adjust this to be a little bit wider. Yeah, so now I've got this curve going, but I might need to change, you know, this again when I'm here. So I go in, that actually looks pretty good. I'm gonna move this. Okay. Go here. Now this one's actually pretty weird. I might have initially wanted to go this way, but it looks like it actually wants to go this way. So yeah, and then we can see back at our first one, we can just adjust a little bit more to be perfect. And right here, I can adjust a little bit more. And I think that looks pretty good. So one thing to note is that every single one of these is mirrored angle and length, and I wanted to preserve that. If there was a case where I didn't mirror the angle, it might just get a little bit more confusing. So here, if I don't mirror the angle, or the length, sorry, it's gonna be like a little bit too far in, a little bit too far out. So you can have a lot more control if you do choose to make the lengths different, make the angles different. But this is going to give you generally the smoothest looking curve. So even though this is not like an orthodox object, it's a pretty weird object, the curves look pretty smooth because they've all got the mirror angle and length going on. So yeah, going to exercise 6, what happens if you do want a sharp angle? Well, when you click and drag to make a handle, it's automatically going to be mirrored. But if you don't want it to be mirrored, you can select the node again, and it'll turn off the mirroring. So if I just make this curve like we made before, like this, and we adjust this to where we want it, and then I decide I want this to be a sharp angle, if you click off of it, or if you click it a second time, it's going to no longer have the curves. If I want to turn them back on, I can go to mirror angle and length and then kind of toggle that. But if you turn off mirroring, it's going to basically, or if you select the node again, it'll let you do whatever you want. So one more time, just down here, let's make a bunch of angles or a bunch of curves. Now these are all curved consistently, but if I want to stop here, I can click it one more time, exactly on the node, and it's going to delete the angle, or delete the anchor. So one more time, right now the anchor is there, and if I click on it, it's gone, and now we can make a straight line. Yep. Now exercise 7, last thing here, almost, we're going to make the, try the selection shortcuts, specifically the duplicating and flipping. So I'm going to make this, it's a straight line, and then from here I'm going to drag out a little bit to get that S curve, drag out a little bit, and then go here. Awesome. For this one, I actually am going to adjust it a little bit. This doesn't need to go in quite as much. That looks good. And then I'm going to select all of it and hold Alt. You see that when I hold Alt and hover, it's going to bring up that secondary cursor. So I'm going to hold Alt and drag it out, press Shift H, and then attach it here. So you see, if you look really, really closely, I'll try to zoom in. the little white node here is going to have an X inside of it to indicate that it's closing the shape. So now I know that it's closed, and when I add the fill, it'll actually fill the whole object, whereas if it was just a little bit off, it would just not fill for me. So if I detach it, and you see that if I drag it in to be really close, but it's not quite there, the fill's not going to add. So just gotta drag it and make sure I see the little red X inside of the node, then I'm good to go. Cool, let's make it pink. Okay, all right, and the last thing we're gonna look at is just the paint bucket. So we're gonna enter vector edit mode for this grid, and then just use the paint bucket to make it a checkerboard. So I'm gonna press enter, and then access the bucket right here, press B, and then just fill in every other square. Yep, that's it. It's just important to make sure that you're comfortable with the bucket. But what if we're here, and then we actually want to have the other ones colored a different color? Well, I can't just add another fill. That's not going to do what I think it's going to do. So what I'm actually going to do is copy it, paste it right on top. Then I'm going to go in and use the bucket tool again, but on the opposite fills. So here I'm going to go in and do the opposite ones, and then I want to make it, blue or something, or purple, blue, yeah. So now I've got that, and what's going on here is that there's two separate vectors that are identical, but they have different paint bucket fills on them, and it's going to give you that illusion of like it has this perfect alignment, but it's really just two vectors. Cool. And that's all for the practice worksheet. So we're going to go straight into the lab activity of the fruit, and I'm just going to walk through how I would approach doing all these fruit. I probably won't be talking quite as much, but I'll just go going through each of these. Okay, so starting with this apple, when we look at it, we see it immediately that the apple part is actually symmetrical. So I can go ahead and make those one vector that I copy paste. So I'm going to go ahead and do it the right side of it. I'm going to click and drag, and then I think around here is good. And then right here. Cool. And then I'm using the selection tool to select this whole curve. I'm going to hold Alt, drag it, and then mirror it. All right, and now I've got an apple. So I want this to be red. So I'm going to color drop that real quick. Red. And I'm going to leave the line not dotted to keep it that way. And then I see that I've got this leaf and this stem up here. I can actually drag this out over here for now. Let's do this leaf. This leaf also seems symmetrical, but because it's not, it's like kind of turned a little bit, I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and draw both. And then here is a case where I want that sharp angle, so I'm going to click the node again. It's going to delete that anchor, and then I'm going to do this way. Okay, that's one shape. I'm going to select the fill to be green. Pop that over here. We'll align them in just a second. And I'll do the stem real quick. So the stem, let's drag that up a little bit to here. Go here. And that's not quite perfect. I'm going to move the handle just like that. And this is a good place for us to use the path bend tool we talked about earlier, actually. So this top line should actually be just a little bit curved, so I'm going to hold Control and mess with just that whole path and just make it just a little curved. And it looks pretty good. Awesome. So that's the apple down. I'm going to add the fill, make it brown, and then I'm going to drag these back over just to get a sense for that. Okay. Drag that on, align this, and then I actually want this to be higher up. So I'm going to go ahead and say bring to front. And then this as well. I want it up to the front, so that's there. Awesome. I'm going to select these and group them, and now I've got an apple. I'm going to put it just a little bit offset so I can see a little, see a little easier. Okay, so this orange, something interesting is that all three of these lines that you see here, each one run with this outside orange one, this middle for the white, and this inner for each of the segments, they're clearly the same vector, but like pulled in the same amount. So it's got this consistent width to it. And then what I actually want to do is make this orange a little differently. I don't think this is how the original Diana made it when she made this lab, but I'm going to use a semicircle to do these things. So it's going to look a little bit different, but let's just try this. So I'm going to make an oval. That feels good. And then I'm going to turn it about 45 degrees, or basically I want it to line up with the angle of this orange. That looks pretty good. So I can align the rotation with like the flat side. Put it here. I'm gonna make it just a little bigger. All right, and this is not gonna be perfect, but I want to try this. So let's use the arc to be 50%. 50% right there. Again, I did that by selecting this little circle right here, and then you can go to sweep it to 50. Okay. And again, this is not going to perfectly line up, but I just want to see how it's going to look. So we'll be doing the same idea. So a trick I'll show you right now is if you want to swap from having a fill to having a stroke, you can do Shift X. Shift X is basically going to just jump you from stroke to fill with the same color. You can see it going on right here. I didn't actually know this. I think one of the TAs actually told me this. I think maybe Caden. Yeah, props to him. So I'm actually going to go ahead and make this just black. At 8, like we were doing before. And now that we've got this, I'm going to make a copy, and then I'm going to shrink it. And you see when I shrink it, it's going to have that perfect ratio still going on. And the way that I shrank that was I held Shift, and then I also held Alt. When you shrink something while holding Alt, it's going to resize based on the center. And because of that, that middle straight line is not moving at all, where if I don't hold Alt, it will move because it's going to align based on another origin point. So because I want these to be perfect, I'm going to hold Shift and Alt while I do that. Cool. And then I'm just going to do about this amount, and I'm going to do another one, copy paste, another one just a little bit smaller. So it's not lined up perfectly. I'm actually going to just go ahead and drag this out to do it above. So we can see a little bit more clearly. Now with this one, let's actually just turn these to be not rotated. Yeah, that's a little easier to work with. So with this middle one, I want it to be 4 segments. So I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to go in here, and you see that it actually already has all these nice segments for me. Yeah, I don't want them exactly there. So I want little gaps in between each. So I'm going to break it apart. So the center is right here, so I'm going to put a gap right there. And then I'm actually just going to delete this middle node, this node right here. And then I'm going to do the same thing to make another kind of cut right around here. I'm going to do it on either side of this, and you might notice that it's going to get a little bit laggy. Just because of what's going on. It's making a lot of new anchors, so it's getting a little bit mad at me. Yeah, so now I've got these broken up sections. I want to break this section up too as well. So now you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm making just 4 pieces of this and making it all line up. Cool. And the last 2 here, right here, and then delete that. Awesome. So you might see now that this line is offset, and that's because when you have it set to inside, but there's not a closed shape, it gets mad at you because there's no inside or outside if you just have a regular line. These 2 are set to inside, but I'm going to go ahead and set them to center, and you're going to see that's going to look fixed. So this happens to me a lot, but the idea is that because it's not a closed shape, if you have it set to inside, like this, it doesn't know what inside is. It doesn't know that you're going to close the shape. So if I set this to inside, yeah, it's not going to do that. But once I do close the shape, it's going to pop to actually have an inside and outside, so it's going to work. But if I delete it again, it's gone. It goes back to center by default. It still says inside just in case you close the shape. So that's what was going on there. Yeah, let's go back in here, and then let's make those segments. This is going to go up to, let's say here, and then this is going to go up to around here, and let's delete, actually let's move this a little bit, and let's delete you, and then let's bring these segments up to be, just eyeball it. You know, that looks good. Oh, I guess this should be straight up. Let's actually go from here. Let's go straight up here, and then here, and then we can adjust it just a little bit. Yep. And go straight up here, and then bring it back down here. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take these 4 segments, add a fill, and color drop it to be this color. Add a fill to this middle, have it go here, and then add a fill to this outer, and have it go here. And that's basically our orange. So it's not quite as perfect as Diana's. I'm actually just going to go in and adjust some of these lines a little bit. Her segments are really perfect. I don't really know exactly what she did to achieve that perfection there, but it looks quite nice. So let's try to mimic that. Just make it a little more separate, not perfect, but that looks a little bit better. So what you're actually seeing here is 3 separate vectors that are kind of weirdly shaped. So it's just got 2 normal semicircles laid on top of each other, and then this weird segmented piece also laid on top. And you'll also notice that because we started with a circle, the whole boundary for the circle is still up here, so it's still really big. If I want to get rid of those, what I can do is outline stroke. Or sorry, that's the wrong thing, sorry. What I can do is flatten it. So when I flatten it, it makes it into one vector, which I don't want, but you see that it gets rid of this. So I can just go into each one, specifically the bottom 2, and flatten them individually. So if I flatten that one, and then I flatten this one, it's going to just bring those all back in so that I don't have the huge bounding box of the original circle. So yeah, that's our orange. Let's turn it. Cool. I'm also going to go ahead and group these and rename to the orange and apple so that they're easier to work with. Apple. Awesome. Okay, banana. This one is a little bit more straightforward. I'm going to do the outside edge first and then do that middle line. So let's start at this corner. Let's bring this here and do this curve. I know this line is not quite where I want it, but I'm going to go back and fix it after. So let's do an angle here. And I'm actually doing it quite poorly right now. It's not really matching the banana at all, but I want to make sure that I keep all of the mirrored angles. So I'm going to go back now that I've closed it and fix it up. So here I want this to be further in. You know, let's do about there. Adjust this. Adjust. Move up. Make this less aggressive. Bring that in. Bring that in as well. Bring this up. You know what, that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. But you know, I have made quite a number of vectors, and I still have to go back and fix them all the time. So don't think that you're not allowed to do that. You absolutely are. That's just part of the process. So yeah, let's do that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just add the center line. Actually, just going from here with a little bit of a curve to here. And this is all going to be a single vector, and we want to make sure that it is filled in the way that it's intended to be filled in, and it is. So that's it. That's our banana. We'll add a fill and make that yellow. Awesome. Cool. Next is this kiwi. And we're also going to cheat here. I don't know if it's what Diana did, but we're going to go ahead and just make this 3 circles instead of making these ovals manually. Or what we can do is start with the ovals and then modify them. Let's actually do that. So we talked about in class how all of the smart shapes and all of the shapes are actually just preset vector networks. So what we can do is go into here, change it to a stroke. Let's make it center like before. And I'm going to go in and just modify it by hand here. So I'm going to drag this over and drag this over. And then I want to tilt this. Let's tilt the whole thing. So I'm going to select this and say mirror angle and length and adjust it. Yep, looks good. Bring it up. Bring it up. Do the same thing here. Make sure it says adjust mirror angle and length. And then do that. Bring it down. And that looks pretty good. So I've gotten it to do the bulk of the work for me by having it be a preset oval. So it's going to have those perfect basic curves for me anyways, and then I can go in and adjust them. Let's make that second one. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and then make it a little smaller, and then we'll go in and fix it up. So line you up to be basically right, and then go in and edit it. So I'm going to move this over, I'm going to move this in, I'm going to make this a little bit more like that. Move you over, and it looks good. And for this last one, let's go ahead and make an oval, and it looks like it's actually just a normal oval tilted a little bit, so let's just do that. Okay, a little wider. That looks pretty close. We'll make this 8 and then black, and make it center as well. Cool, and now we're just going to make these little seeds, and they're clearly all the same seed, so we'll just make one and then copy paste it a bunch of times. So here we go. One side of it, and then that's a seed. That sure looks like a seed to me. And we'll actually just make the vector a little bit thinner, so it's not quite as fat. Maybe like 5. And then this one seed, I'm going to exit all the way out so that these are all separate vectors, and then I'll just place them where I think they would go. Cool. This is not the most glamorous Kiwi of all time, but it's getting the job done. It's doing what we need it to do. Okay, pasty. So with this, I guess it would have been a good idea for me to add the color to all of them, but I could just go in and select each one. And then set them all to have the same fill. Again, you can like kind of refill or recolor multiple objects at the same time, so it won't be an issue. Yeah, we can see here that that center oval is not quite where we'd want it to be, so I'm going to go in and adjust it once more. Okay. So I've got to be manual, and that's the last one. Perfect. So let's go in and adjust you a little bit more. Let's bring this down, and that looks pretty good. Okay, now I've got this whole Kiwi. I'm going to go ahead and drag it all the way off, and then we can add the colors to it. So bottom, outside here, or let's add a fill to all of them. Here, this is going to be brown, this is going to be green, this is going to be lighter green. And then, just to be easier, I'm going to select everything and then deselect the big ovals and then add the color there. Perfect. That's a Kiwi. Kiwi. Let's add this here. All right, last couple here. I know this is getting quite long. Are the blueberry and the blackberry, I suppose, or grapes? I'm not really sure. I guess it's grapes. Okay, let's do those real fast. So same idea here. We're gonna start with an oval, and then these are clearly like the same vector, but resized. So we're gonna do that. I'll show you how to kind of do that as well. Let's turn it. Actually, let's start with this. Let's do the big one. Let's do the big one. I'm gonna make you a little bigger and flip that. Make this black. Make this 8. we're gonna go in, set it to center, and adjust it. Go here, go here, go here, and yeah, that looks good. Cool. And then we've got this kind of like flower shaped thing going on here. So we're gonna go in and do that by hand as well. We're gonna make each petal, and you're gonna see that each one is the same idea. It's gonna be, you know, 2 anchors on each side and then broken into a sharp angle between each one. So we're just gonna trace that. Oh, go here. Sorry, I'm getting very quiet. There's just very, very deep concentration right now. And then that last one. Awesome. That's basically that. And then let's make an oval again for the center. Go to black, go to 8, and turn. Make you center. Let's actually make this 5. A little thinner so we can see all the details. And then let's go in and adjust. Okay, and that's our blueberry. So let's drag these off to get the colors. Shoot down here. Okay. Add a fill. Do this one, and then do this one. And then the other one is the same shape but smaller in turn. So I'm going to copy it, paste it, and then I'm going to flip it with Shift H. It's going to flip all 3, and then make it just a little smaller holding Shift to make sure that it resizes proportionally. And yep, turn it just a little more. That's blueberries. So we'll group these and rename it blueberries. Now this final grape one is a little bit more confusing, but what you can see here is that it looks like it was just a bunch of circles that are kind of unioned together. So we talked about unions before, and even if this isn't necessarily the way that Diana made it, I'll go ahead and show you how that can be really helpful. So let's make this basic shape of the whole outside edge. I'm going to go ahead and do all of them, add all of the grapes that I think go here. And then if you recall from class, when you union something, it's going to turn it into a single vector. And then from there, we can edit the vector however we want, if we want to, because once you union it, you can also flatten it, like we saw earlier when I did that on accident. When you flatten it, it's going to actually treat it as one vector and not have all the little pieces inside of it. So let's take all of these gray circles that match the outside edge, and then let's union. And you see that it reacts like one vector, but it still has all these pieces inside. So what I'm going to do is flatten it. And click this, flatten selection, and now it's actually a single vector. And what I want to do is just delete all of these in the inside. So I'm going to select those, I'm going to remove the fill, and then just select all of these. So sometimes it gets weird because what's going on is that the inside piece is not really part of the outside piece anymore. So I'm just going to drag it out, delete all of those, and then drag this bad boy back in. And now we've got the entire outside edge. That's awesome. And it didn't take us very long because we kind of cheated, and that's okay. So we're going to add the stroke. It's going to be 8 again. And then I want to add all of these little details. And these details are basically, the way that Diana made this is really clever. They look like little outlines of circles inside. So no reason to really reinvent the wheel. Let's just go ahead and do it through circles again. So if I make a circle, what I can actually do is, like before, go in and delete some of the parts of it. So let's do some of the bottom ones. I'm not going to do everything because we are cutting a little close on time. I'll just show you how I would do this. So if I want to go in here, we can do it as a stroke and then just delete this. And then add a node here for that spot where it goes where I want it to go, and then delete this one. Now I've got this nice kind of perfectly round curve that's going to do what I needed to do. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the edges are rounded so that they look nice. Sorry, right here. And then I'm not gonna do all of them. I would basically just repeat that whole process many times. But now I have this nice little like butt on the grape, and I can just copy it if I need to. Bring those around. I should ideally be doing all of these by hand, but I'm just gonna cut the lab here basically and call it kind of a day. But I can get the basic idea of texture that she was going for by just going ahead and pasting these. Yep. And then with this, I'm just going to go ahead and add a fill to be purple. Add a fill and be purple. And then I'm going to call this my blackberry, or my grapes, sorry. And that's it. That's all 6 fruit. All of them had like a little bit of something different to offer. I'm just going to drag these in and make my little salad. I could really go for some blueberries right now also. But that's all for this lab. I hope it was helpful. I know that I kind of spent a long time talking about some different things, but pen tool is pretty tricky to get used to. You're definitely just gonna have to practice a lot if you want it to be something that you're really comfortable with. And I also want to just say, if this is not your alley, if you do not really like doing this, that's totally fine. You do not have to be doing pen tool or vectors or illustration to be a designer. It's just one route that we wanted to explore. If you had a lot of fun with this, go deep with it. If you really hated it and you do not ever want to see a Bezier curve for the rest of your life, that's fine. We're not going to force you to do it, except for the homeworks. Other than that, we'll never force you to do it again. But that's all for me tonight. Thank you so much, and have a good one.